Hi, everyone. My name is Chantal Bilodeau. I am the artistic director of the Arts and Climate Initiative, which is an organization that focuses on using live performance to generate conversation and encourage people to take action around climate. I'm also one of the co-organizer of a festival called the Climate Change Theater Action Festival, which we're going to talk about more in the course of this panel. And I'm very excited to have two Ians and one Johnny with me today to talk about climate theater. Thank you for being with us. I hope this is a good conversation. And I'm going to start by asking each of you, my panelists, to introduce yourself and take 2, 3 minutes to introduce yourself and maybe introduce how you are involved in climate theater. And I'm going to start with Johnny.
Hi everyone, I'm Johnny G. Lloyd, he, him pronouns. I am a playwright, producer, curator. I currently serve as the co-artistic director at the Tank, where we have two eco festivals, Trashfest and Darkfest, and I curate those. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Ian Morgan.
That wasn't 2 to 3 minutes, Johnny.
Oh, I know, I know. I can go. I feel like I feel like we're gonna go longer later. That's my hunch.
I'll come back. Yeah, I'll definitely come back to everyone.
yeah, I was like, how the heck am I gonna fill 2 or 3 minutes? But yeah, I mean, I could go into my history, but I'm the associate artistic director at the New Group, off-Broadway theater company, and here in New York City, just a few blocks away from the Tank, where Johnny's based, and um, uh, yes, and we've produced a couple times a Climate Play Festival, which we're going to talk about today, um, and also have done some work. We produced a play that I think of as a climate play, which was featured at the Broadway Climate Summit. A little excerpt um, called Evanston Salt Cost Climbing by Will Arbery, um, and are actively developing more plays that could fit that description. I'm sure we'll discuss the description. Um, but yeah, I've been at the New Group for a long time. Uh, do both the new play developments and the producing side, um, and have been, I guess, kind of active in climate um, organizing and petitioning of government officials for 10 or 12 years, uh, and trying to think about how to make my theater life uh, align with that, uh, with you know only moderate success. So I'm looking forward to getting to talk to everyone about it.
Thank you. Ian Garrett.
Thanks. I'm Ian Garrett, he, him. I am I'm a designer or eco-scenographer, primarily working in lighting and video, but also do scenic. I'm based in Toronto because I teach ecological design for performance at York University here in Toronto. I'm also the long-term director and co-founder of the Center for Sustainable Practice in the Arts, now a nonprofit in Canada, which works on issues of the intersection of arts and culture and sustainable development. More recently, I also co-direct an Edinburgh venue called Venue 13, and we just launched a nonprofit to help artists who are bringing work to Edinburgh Festival be more sustainable, hybrid, and accessible called Future 13. And for the last 10 years, I've co-directed the CCTA with you, Chantal.
CCTA as in Climate Change Theater Action.
Yes,
Yes.
I went with the acronym because you had mentioned it earlier.
Yeah. Thank you. Um, Johnny, I'm going to come back to you. So you are part of the Tank, and you produce, or at least work on
Yes.
Darkfest and Trashfest. And
Yes. So the Tank is oh, should I just go? Should I just go?
yeah, just
Yeah.
go, just go.
So the Tank is we're based in Manhattan. We're on 36th Street, and we are, I think, equal parts an artistic organization and a service organization, right? So our mission is to remove economic barriers for emerging artists. And the way that we've done that over the last 20 years is space. So our space is free for people to use. We use a lightly curated open submissions process in order to figure out, who is coming into the space, and then we say, here's the space, here are the keys, do what you want to do. In doing that, one of the things that means is that our space is active a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. And when we were thinking initially, this was over 12 years ago, about our footprint on the environment, one of the things that we realized is that our lights are on all the time, because we constantly have people rehearsing, we constantly have people producing work. And so we were in the situation where we were like, well, so much of what the theater's impact on our environment comes to like what resources we're using, and we're using a lot of resources. And we said, what would it mean for us to have the lights off for a week? And so Darkfest was our first eco festival. And what that focuses on is that essentially the grid is not accessible. You cannot turn it on. I believe we allow for one practical plugin. So if you need to use a lamp, you can, but that is essentially it. And we've been doing this festival for the last 12 years, really focusing on both the opportunity to innovate through using some interesting new techniques, and also I think that constraint can be a really exciting tool for artists to use. And so, how are you going to respond to the fact that you might not have the projector, you won't have the spotlight that you might imagine in a certain setting? Instead, you're going to imagine something that really focuses on the interaction right between the artist and the audience. So that was our first eco festival. When we moved into the pandemic, obviously we were not in our space, and we were still very interested in what other tools we had in our closet. And the thing that we had a lot of conversations about is about the amount of material that is just discarded after a production. We see this on a nearly daily basis because we have so many shows in. And we were saying, what would it mean for us to invest more in models that allow for a larger amount of recycled material? And so Trashfest was born out of that. We started that process in 2020. And that process is essentially for shows that do not that all of the items that are used in them are either found or they are recycled. And so everything must be on at least its second life, if not its third, its fifth, its 10th. And so I think that what I really love about both of these festivals and the curation process, because while we are, I would say, more of a curation house than a presenting house than necessarily like a capital P producers, because of the amount of work that happens in our space. What I find really interesting about curating these festivals is that we are finding this really interesting balance between work that is very clearly artistically aligned with the climate work that is happening at the macro level in the festival, right? So we will have shows that are very clearly about the environment and very clearly about how our effect on the environment, right? And then simultaneously, we'll have shows that really dig deep into the practice of taking care of the environment, but might be about something entirely different. But the way that they are taking care of the environment is so deeply baked into the way that they are building the work. And I think that those are the things that we really respond to, because it's like, how can we bring these skill sets that you develop when you are taking care of the environment in these very particular ways and bring them through the theatrical ecosystem, right? So that they're not just staying in this festival, but that they are moving on to shows that have second and third lives, and are still not using the grid or still using only found materials. How can we foster that kind of relationship?
And so do the artists create work for the festival, knowing the constraints, or do they bring something already created and then they work within the constraints?
We have a mixture of situations, right? So we sometimes work with artists that are very aware of these restraints and are building something, and it's deeply baked in, right? And those are shows that we absolutely love. We also really love when somebody is looking at the work that they've made and they say, actually, we really, we actually think that we don't need these things. We don't need to have the things, the items that we maybe initially imagine the show with. And then they begin to move their practice over to how can I look at something that is more sustainable for the environment. And so we try to pull different pieces that come from different places and put them in conversation with each other.
That's great. I wish I could have seen some of these shows when I was in New York. Thank you, Ian Morgan. So the new group has put on, is it still a reading series, a climate reading series?
It's a festival, but yes, readings. Yeah.
Festival?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we've done it within a week, um, each
Can
time.
you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Uh, yeah, the instinct was partly to find the plays that where people are kind of tackling the climate crisis directly, if not explicitly. Um, and uh, to kind of on the initial impulse was just to celebrate that as a possibility, right? Um, because I think classically it's uh, climate is one of the harder things to talk about, um, certainly politically, but I think in any situation that most of us don't want to talk about it. It's like I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but when you raise it with even people you're close to, generally the response is nothing. Right? So, uh, yeah, I mean, I think that was quite discouraging to me for a long time, and it's discouraging to producers too, right? So, while there have been plays that deal with climate for a long time, um, it's not like one has led to another really. So uh, putting together a number of plays and being able to see the options seemed to me like something that would be useful for me anyway. And yeah, so putting 3 to 5 plays um, up against each other to kind of see, oh, well, that's a completely different way to talk about it. Um, and being able to consider that stories can be a lot of things and still make us think about our predicament in new ways. um, is encouraging to me and hopefully to the writers. At least that is what I've heard from writers who've been involved in it, is it's good, you feel less alone, right? But also you begin to see, oh, there are lots of ways I could go with this. Um, and you start to see that there's an audience. Um, there are people for whom this, addressing it directly is a relief. So, um, it's very much what the climate change theater action does too, right? You kind of form a community around something like this. So it's expanding into full-length plays like the kinds that you write, Chantal, that you know uh, people may not be that familiar with that as uh, as a thread or a tendency within the theater. And the more we can make people aware of it, the better. Um, and then there's um, yeah, I'll just say that. So that's the festival, and hoping to continue it in figure out more ways in which it can be present and be useful.
And how long has the festival been running?
We've only done it twice. We did it once, I think 4 years ago, and then this year. Um, and yeah, I mean, this is, the limitations of the small theater company where we're doing lots of other things. Uh, we're kind of able to do one thing focused on climate every year. One year we worked with you guys on the climate change theater action and worked with our students at LIU Brooklyn devising a new climate play in kind of the civilians model. And then we've done these festivals as well and produce Will Arbery's play. But I would like to make it an annual thing, and that's sort of our current goal. Make it at least more frequent and more deliberate.
Well, here's hoping.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ian, Garrett, you do many things climate related.
Yes.
So you choose which one you would like to talk about, or all of them.
Oh, is that the prompt? Do you want to?
That's the
Director's
problem.
one?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's though the thing that I don't do in theater is I'm not a performer, so I'm gonna say that I'm typecast as somebody who works on like sustainable and climate based work for it, um, generally, and I've been able to do my career around that. It's been interesting because I I'm the person that gets called when like we're trying to figure something out. I'm kind of a special projects person on that, so I don't know. Like it's hard to see the boundary because that's sort of become the defining factor of the types of things I get invited in to do. Right now, I think the highlight is so the CSBA up until earlier this year had been the host for the Creative Green Tools Canada platform, which is based off of the Joyce Bicycle platform of formerly of the same name. It's now called the Creative Climate Tools for it. It's changed a few times. And we have been doing emissions tracking with parts of the art sector, like not just theater, up here for a while. But the sort of temperature had changed, and the way that funding has moved around has made it so that's not necessarily viable. So we've sort of been spinning that down more recently for it. But the shift in my own work, it sort of coincided with restarting a venue that I was involved with in Edinburgh. So similarly tied to like how do we host work and present work. And part of starting that up this last year was in before the official start of the climate change theater action, is that we had 20 events in which we managed that some of them had to be recorded, but managed to get all 50 of this year's festival plays like produced as part of the festival there, and sort of became a bit of a climate hub there, and sort of using that as a way to consolidate a number of these different things, of working with actually producing and presenting work. And then that's why we started up this Future 13 CIO, charitable incorporated organization, nonprofit in UK parlance, around supporting other artists to do that like in a specific context as well, because I'm finding more and more that it's like throughout the research that I've been involved with it, it's always contextually specific, and then really changing gears recently from like let's try and make tools that are universally available, because that's hard, to how do we make things, how do we do it in a very specific context in which we can try and model something. So that's become like the real focus of late. My own work that I work on as well is in developing projects that talk about climate. I have with a collaborator who also co-runs the venue, have a piece called AI Campfire. It does look at impacts of AI and uses AI on various components for it. Not the like there's human artists at the back of every element of it. So it's sort of an exploration there, which comes out of like a 10-year long exploration of like how AI will work around environmental management and agricultural systems. So I'm trying to create work around climate that's very specifically things that I'm working on. And then how do you create the tools and the systems that support others and being able to come along and do that? I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you. Um, I'm just going to take 2 minutes to say more about climate change theater action for people who don't know, because we've been referring to it a number of times. So, climate change theater action is a global festival. It started in 2015. Um, what we do is we commission 50 playwrights from around the world. They write very short plays. They're about between, I always say it has to be less than 10 minutes. So they're like 5 to 7 minutes, based on a prompt. And then we make these plays available to anyone, anywhere in the world who wants to put up an event, using one or several of the plays. And since it's called Climate Change Theater Action, we also say, please include an action as part of your event. And that's something that goes beyond the theatrical presentation, and we leave it completely open. But the goal is to encourage people to maybe take one more step towards engaging with climate issues. So some of these actions have been stuff like doing a river cleanup, or donating to a food bank, and some are more personal. Like there was a class at Brandeis who produced an event a number of years ago, and they all vowed to go vegan. And I went and visited. They invited me a couple of years later to visit, and they were still vegan. So that was kind of interesting. So climate change theater action happens every other year. This year is one of the years it's happening. So if you go to our website, there's a bunch of events, and people, yeah, all over the world have participated. It's very exciting. That said, I would like to ask, and this is a question for everyone. I'm interested in what kind of reactions, impact. I kind of hate impact because that's very grand speech. But what kind of reactions, feedback you've gotten from working on your respective projects that engage with climate? And if you want to highlight like one piece of it in particular that you felt was particularly successful, and anyone can jump in.
I mean, I feel like I'm up.
Okay.
um, I think that from our vantage point, and I think what's really exciting is that we all have different kind of outlooks in terms of like where in the community we're sitting, right? So I think we're all going to have really different outlooks in terms of where we've seen this kind of like really exciting growth. But I think that for me, it's been two parts. The first part is when something does move on and carries with it the tenets that I think put it in the festival in the first place. I remember seeing a show that I think had initially been in Darkfest, and then I think it qualified for both Darkfest and Trashfest. It both was all recycled materials and also did not use the electrical lighting. And I remember seeing it do a full run at the Brick, which is a similar venue. I want to say a year afterwards, it did a 2 week run, and it was so exciting to see something stay true to itself and to test that, have a space to test it out and figure out exactly how the things that they were working with, like how that form was going to function, and then seeing it move into fuller production was extraordinarily exciting. And I think that the other thing is like there are so many artists for whom theater, they came to theater already very invested in in ecological issues. And so for them, it is very deep inside of their practice. And I think it's always really exciting to encounter that. So this last year we had a piece called Twig by Sage Molaski, who has been working in ecofeminism and ecofeminist spaces for a very long time, actually, and came to theater after that, right? And so to see this piece that was so clearly rooted in it, and also like it was rooted in it, it was a comedy, so it was also fun and funny, and then simultaneously you have, the entire space is used cardboard boxes, right? And to see all of that at the same time with somebody who has really put in the work over a long period of time, I think was just so exciting to see that culmination and to have a space where all of those parts were equally weighted.
And can you give an example of what does it look like when people don't use the grid?
Yes. So I've seen it. It's been a couple of different. There are a couple different options, right? Sometimes everyone is in the dark. Sometimes you're just in the dark, and that's okay, right? Like sometimes it is it's kind of the physical version of radio play, and that is what you get. Sometimes I've seen shows where there's been one flashlight, um, and so the focus is on like what is being illuminated, but in that one moment. And then I think that the show that I'm thinking of in particular, which I wish I could remember their name right now. It's like oh gosh, I know Ruben Glazer worked on it. There was one television. The television was the light, and the television was plugged in, and that was the only thing that was plugged in. And so if the television was off, then you could not see. But because everyone was so close, you could feel. And I
Mm.
think that what it does is it really heightens the audience's other senses, right? Everything matters so much because you might not have the tool of your vision that you might have expected to have when you walked into the theater. And so every sound is very important. Sometimes people will use smell, sometimes people will use, all sorts of other tools in order to get their story across. And I think that can be really, I think it's really fun.
That reminds me, I saw a play a long time ago by the what are they called? The Theater of Oklahoma? The
Nature Theater of
Nature
Oklahoma.
theater.
Yes, yes. And it was a spoof on Romeo and Juliet, where they asked people to tell them what the play was about, and then that they kind of presented that verbatim. And then at the end of the show, they turned off all the lights, and then they did one of the monologues, but true to itself, not as a parody, in the dark. And this was so powerful because, as you say, like all your other senses are heightened. Yeah, okay, wonderful. Uh, I'm gonna keep going in the same direction. Ian Morgan. Yeah, do you want to speak to reactions, things that you thought were particularly successful, if you have examples?
Sure. Uh, yeah, on a few of the things we've done, we've worked with NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and uh, kind of, worked especially with their Rewrite the Future lab, which is climate storytelling, as they put it. And where they're helping Hollywood, as the term they use, try to think about how to include climate storytelling in their work. So they're doing film specifically, but yeah, we kind of aligned with NRDC in terms of what we were kind of looking to encourage and support, and uh, it was nice to see that that being an activist nonprofit around environmental issues. It was nice to see that there was a lot of commonality between their work and ours, and they were very excited to and are very excited to think of the theater being a place where that kind of investigation of climate storytelling can keep going. So that was nice. And I think you were involved in one of the panels we did, Chantal, and we had folks from around the community. For instance, a woman who ran a climate organization in Sunset Park, who were responding to the plays we were doing, and it was very clear that for activists, for people who were working in the community around this issue, seeing it represented on stage, as with many, kind of anything, uh, was a real shot in the arm, right? It was a real boon to be able to have it reflected back to you. Um, so that was great. And as far as examples, well, some of the plays that we featured are have or are getting productions like the example Johnny gave. Um, Erica Dickerson Dispenza's play Shadowland, which we did in the series, was done at the Public, and uh, kind of an incredible sort of puts you right in it, uh, uh, sort of tragedy around climate. Um, and right now, Jessica Huang's play Mother of Exiles, which we featured, is getting a production at Berkeley Rep. I think it starts like this week. Um, and I was thinking of that play and then this other play, uh, which we featured recently, Marvin Gonzalez de Leon's play, Too Close to Earth. They both go forward in time, and they're interested in kind of the generational aspect of it. Um, and it's, that seemed to me to be, one way of talking about it that's really interesting. Taking a family essentially in both cases, or a couple of families, and just kind of seeing how their lives change in relation to the environment changing in drastic ways. But telling the story of the family, not of, you know, not the environment per se, um, and what it means to them and their sort of emotional survival. Uh, and Marvin's play, Too Close to Earth, does it in uh, rather comic ways, which I think is also a great strategy if it makes sense. Um, so yeah, everyone go see Jessica's play in Berkeley, and hopefully, I think it should, I believe, get more productions, and I hope it will. There's another one that we recently featured, Precarious by Steph Del Rosso, that's getting a production uh, this spring at Mosaic in DC. So catch all these plays.
And you said earlier, when you started this festival, you wanted to go look for climate plays, for plays that deal with climate. How hard was it to find them?
It's actually not, yeah, there are not a lot actually. I mean, there are probably more than I think, because we haven't done like a general call for climate plays like you guys have with the action. Um, but uh, yeah, in my experience, there's a lot of writers who've kind of are working on one, but maybe haven't finished it, or don't feel confident of it. Just anecdotally, people I talk to. Um, and uh, yeah, I think there's a need for more development, as well as festivals where you're featuring plays, where people can get more feedback and more contact around the work, so that they can really tell the story they want to tell. Um, so uh, I would love to find out about more plays, but I did this time kind of reach out to more agents, and just to kind of find out what among their plays that they knew they would consider fitting, and everyone did have something. Um, so it was uh, it's not not yet a flood, so to speak, but I think it's beginning to go in that direction.
I've certainly noticed it with younger generations, like you were saying, Johnny, it's just part of their DNA, and
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Chantal, can you put in the chat the playwrights that Ian just mentioned? Precarious, Too Close to Earth, Shadowland.
Actually, Ian,
Amy will do it for us.
Yeah, I'll put
okay.
it in the chat. Yep, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Ian Garrett.
One of the big things is it's been an area. Well, that last comment is has been something that I've been reflecting on because I moved to Toronto in 2012 to take on this position of ecological design for performance, and it was something that the university was starting to integrate into what I was doing. Like it created, and I'm in the process of rewriting a bunch of stuff about it, but it was associated with creating an MFA that was focused on ecological design for performance, which is small, work a little bit differently than design MFAs in the States, or a more generalist or disciplinarily specific one. But it's been interesting because it means that there's now this is my 13th year there, and so at least locally there's a lot more people who have gone out, left, like graduated and are working and have worked their way up to some level. So like seeing, to the extent that it's directly impacted there or that gave them some skills, is we can argue exactly where it came from, but that it was like present and part of the conversation then or earlier on, that there's now people in that have that awareness or have that interest, that are coming into like different levels of decision making ability for it. So I see that there's like small, like incremental changes just in the way that people are doing things, because people do things differently, like that are somewhat unconscious too. I know, Chantal, you had organized a gathering in 2019 at the Banff Center, and I was talking to the director of Julie's Bicycle in the UK, Alison Takala, who was there, and we were both sort of we catch up every so often because there's like a handful of us that like have been doing this for a while. Like we founded the CSPA in 2008, and it had been a couple of years before that I started sort of working and exploring my own work in relationship to climate. And I remember we had a conversation there that I was like, we both sort of realized that we were like, are we out of touch? Do we not know what's going on? Because it felt like we were very separated from a bunch of other work that was happening. And I think we realized that it was like through conversation, through talking to other people, realized that it was just like there's a lot more people. Like we couldn't keep everybody in our head anymore for it. There were a lot more people doing work. And since then, I've sort of like realized that it's like impossible to keep it in my head. So there has been a significant growth. I think it's ebbed and flowed because, as with anything that's sort of like values based and not necessarily essential to something being executed, it tends to be associated with like it's hard to codify within like organizational structures or things like that. It really ties into the individual people committing to things. So that's like it's ebbed and flowed a little bit depending on like, are there more resources or is there something specifically to it? But it's been on, like if you did that like scatter plot, you'd have an upward trajectory of integration for it. I think, and I think that we're sort of getting to a point where it's like nearly every play is a climate play, because that's just the world we live in now. Like it's part of the conversations, part of the background information there. I think one of the other big things that we saw, and Chantal, you and I have talked about this quite a bit in regards to the climate change theater action and the plays that are being submitted. And we saw this actually this last summer. This is a unique experience for me, right? So the CCTA, we decided we were going to do all 50 plays for it. And we had like, it's nearly impossible to get a review for like a review of like, there was no point in reviewing any one of the individual events because there was 20 different events, right? So perhaps we're talking about more sort of the festival and we were approaching to it. And then there was at another theater, I'm not going to name names, but there at another theater in town, there was a show that was billed as it was running every day for it. And in two of the reviews for that, including one in just like the opening sentence. They're like, you should go to the CCTA instead. And the rationale for it was because it was like, oh, do we need more like post-apocalyptic, like everything's bad sort of approach to things? And I think that one of the big impacts that we're seeing and talking about it more is also like, one, people have a bit of agency in the topic, that more people want to talk about it than I think than people realize for it. People are a little tentative to it, and they want to talk about like what's on the other side, and they want to be hopeful about it, and they're like they want to work on it. And so I think that there's a lot more like joy in it than I felt like there was before. Like people are very excited about it. And people are sort of turning against the like everything is bad, nothing's going to work out, because there's nothing to do then, and it's just like sit there and allow it to wash over you. So I think that more people are involved, which has also allowed just more people to be active about it, and people are really interested in solutions. Might be a little bit too, but like finding like what can we do, where are we going to get over this, how are we going to get to through whatever this is, and what are those like hopeful ways, in a way that like theater can serve and as a way of like modeling other ways of doing things. So I think that there's a lot more positivity actually in it. It's a lot more the aesthetic that we've ascribed to the CCTA has been around solar punks, this idea that like there's a lot of solutions, there's a lot of ways to do things, and so like let's get what are we excited about doing? What is the future that we're excited about?
I think it's also like survival. We can't live in this despair, doom, like it's just impossible to, I mean, if you have to live in it day after day after day, it's just impossible. So we need to find a way to be joyful and to do this work with some kind of optimism.
Yeah, and there's two ideas like sort of embedded in there that I think are good. There's like every time I want to actually remember his name, I forget it, but because it's like around like it's easier for most people to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism. That's one of the things to keep in mind. And also, when we're talking about apocalypse, like the apocalypses that are possible due to climate, it really does a number on white supremacy, because when you're dealing with populations that have experienced like attempts at genocide and erasure, like apocalypse has already happened. You can get through an apocalypse um, uh, if you let go of white supremacy.
Yeah. And then the third thing I like to remember is from Einstein, you can't, I'm going to paraphrase it, but you can't solve a problem with the same tools you use to create it, something like
Right.
that. So yeah, we have to think outside of the box. Um, Actually, Ian, I'm going to ask you the same, Ian. I'm going to ask you if you want to say, if you want to say more, because I'm sure people are curious about this. What the AI about AI, how like about AI campfire and
Oh,
what that
sure.
was.
It's been, and so, like I said, I've been tied to like active like direct AI research for like 10 years, and sort of adjacent to it for like nearly 20, nearly as long as I've been doing this. So it's been really interesting to actually see it become such a hot topic in the last couple of years. Like it's expanded. And I've been talking about on this more recently, because like it's been puzzling in like what is the change, and I think it has a lot more to do with interface than like the technology itself doing it, because like you can point to the foundation of LLMs back in 2004, like when Google bought or created Google Books and Google Scholar. Like there's a reason that they did that for that. Anyway, without getting into like the history and like when we're going to say that that started too, it's been something that like as I've been thinking about it, and actually I remember giving this is part of my talk at the Banff gathering too, is like this question of like with a speed and efficiency sort of assumption around AI, what do we do with that additional time? And in that case, I was like, what do farmers do with the additional time? Because there's this idea of like, you could use that to do more, bigger, 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 and consume more, or you can use it to make it easier to work in complex systems for it. So a lot of the exploration around AI Campfire has been around the premise. Oh, there's so many different sources of origin there that like one day I will have a concise way of talking about it. But the core premise is this idea that there are other ways of being with the world, especially in terms of agriculture, that you can see in various, particularly indigenous systems. If you don't want to appropriate indigenous systems from one place to import them to another, where that would defeat the purpose of them, where would we find the more integrated indigenous and agricultural systems of Europe because of the way that agriculture is spread there? And so it's this premise of what can we learn by going as far back into folklore as possible to look at backwards engineering into a future where we're using that efficiency and like a more relational approach to AI as a way of scaling things that are better integrated into the world and our way of being. So the big thing, better to do in theater than to try and actually accomplish literally. It does involve AI parts of it too, because we've wanted to like, inform it and just not imagine, like, I don't think it's true there. But we have a lot of questions then, or people bring us a lot of questions. We've also been about those ethical uses for it. I already mentioned that like all the actual creation for it, like it's well documented, the way that we use models and things like that. And so this conversation, and from working in sustainability for a long time and showing up at conferences, I'm used to getting asked like, oh, but you traveled. There's a lot of whataboutism, is that like, oh, you participate in the system in which you critique. Isn't that aren't you undermining your own argument? I think so. I'm used to going back and like being like, okay, here's what I can tell you about that for it. So the AI component has been really interesting because one of the big concerns is that it's cooking the planet, and that it's very much more a capitalist problem than a technology problem. That is, like, there is no reason to use that amount of energy or to use clean drinking water that other people are using to make this work. Most of the time, like, ever increasing amounts. I like to say 95%. It's not a scientific number, but the vast majority of what people are doing with something like ChatGPT, which right now, like hours chat on ChatGPT is, depending on how you're using it and what you're watching, is less, about a 1/5 of the consumption, somewhere between 1/5 to 1/4. I'm going backwards with my fractions there, but of the consumption of like streaming HD video. And those networks, as we were part of the background research that we've done around like emissions, and that has been around digital transmission too for it. And it all depends on like where it is and where the data centers are. So actually you can have an extremely clean way of doing that in a networked way. You can also like run it all locally too. There's no way to do it. So it's actually, I think it's being released today. I co-wrote a chapter on a sustainable game residency, which was all about like developing video games in an offline, off-grid situation and seeing what came of that. And all of that we've also then been applying to like AI. It's like, how do you use it off-grid for it, which you can totally do for it. So these questions of like the systems and putting things together are sort of part and parcel in that work as well. It's like facing those things similar to, I feel like, when a lot of the climate work that I've been involved with is like, oh, we got to look at these things head on. We are part of these systems. They are happening around us, and it's not the like, well, if you can't beat them, join them sort of approach to things. But I think that it's really important for us to be looking at all the potential tools, or to at least understand them, and not to universally dismiss them. There are huge problems with the way that particularly generative AI has been implemented for commercial gain and for displacing all sorts of people in professional settings or otherwise, and the human component to it. But there are still uses for these tools that I think that offer some exciting ways through things as well. And so it's still an area that I'm excited to explore. But we do get people who are angry that we're doing it at all for it.
Thank you. We could spend a whole hour just on
Oh
this,
yeah,
I'm sure,
yeah,
and more.
yeah.
Yeah. We have a few more minutes before we open it up to questions. So I want to ask if so people in the room, please, if you have questions, you can start putting them in the chat, or you can raise your hand, and we will come to you in a couple of minutes. But before that, I wanted to ask all you three if there is anything that jumps to you that you feel is missing, like in this intersection of theater and climate. Is there anything that is not happening that you wish you would see happen? I mean, I could say that I wish there was more, which is maybe the easiest thing to wish for. But from your point of view, is there anything that you would like to see that is not happening at the moment? Johnny, you were nodding.
Yeah, I was like, I'm probably this is I think a thing that I'm always tracking, and that I think I see, we work with emerging artists very often, and I think that there is still a little bit of the perception of like, oh well, this show that's like very like ecologically friendly is like my small show that is like, like we're not going to use this resource, and that's okay, because when I have the big show, like my big show will be on Broadway, and like, I'll be using all of the tools that are available to me, and I do think that in terms of process making, like thinking less about like the content and more about the process making, like how can we get people to understand that at every level, actually, they can be using these tools. Like this is not like an indie toolbox, but rather this is something that they can take with them throughout the entirety of their career, and they do not need to. The definition of scaling up is actually something that we can shift and change. So that's what's on my mind.
Yeah, that's a great observation, because we've been trained to think that more is better, and it's not necessarily, and you don't have to have more to be more creative or to be more successful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple very different sides, but on the one hand, I think in American theater, we always have a challenge kind of talking directly about politics and just getting into the nitty gritty of it, which the British do a lot, and other communities do quite a lot. But America, we're a little shy of combining that with theater, and this, the climate crisis is not all about politics, but politics is part of it. And as Ian Garrett was saying, it's the politics of the technology is a big part of it. So there's a lot to be wrestled with, and I think could be dramatic if people were to get into that on stage. And the other thing that I should add, environmental justice, I think, is a major part of that, and that's not something that I've seen a lot in climate storytelling so far, although we featured a number of plays like that, like the ones I mentioned, but it's certainly something that could come up a lot more. And the other thing that I've been thinking about recently is just one of the things theater does well is um, is get at how we actually feel in the moments. um, and how we deal with our feelings about things. And that's a way that when you're dealing with an issue like this, it's hard to realize that that really it's not so much about the issue as it is about helping people figure out how they feel about it, and kind of reflecting back how we're actually absorbing this. or failing to absorb it. So, that which a lot of plays do that, but I think combining that with something where it's an overwhelming issue, writing about being overwhelmed, for instance, as Will Arbery did in that play, for instance, um, uh, is really valuable, I think, for audiences, certainly for me as an audience member, um, and something I'd love to see more of.
Yeah, there's something about, I've often heard the comment, people who go and see this work, that they feel, regardless of the content, but when it deals with climate, that they feel more hopeful. Because they feel this, they feel validated, and they feel a sense of community.
Right. Exactly.
Ian, Garrett?
Yeah, I wanted to jump onto a couple of points there. One on the eco justice part of it too, and like the complexity there, and there are excellent stories that I think just haven't been explored in it quite yet. So if anybody's looking for some fodder, these other two are free. I can give you some source material, I guess. I haven't had time for it. One is like just briefly looking at, particularly in the U.S., the redlining to redevelopment to arts facility pipeline, is which leads to like also different changes in like the heat island effect, because of like the investment in various areas based off of like prejudicial housing and property, and real estate practices throughout the 20th century of like distributed where things show up and then where redevelopment funds go now, and then that usually the arts are used to anchor projects like that as well, so that you end up with a lot of large arts facilities in places that are like measurably hotter than other parts of the same city, because of they don't have mature trees. It's as simple as that, because nobody planted them because there wasn't money to do that. Or that here in Canada, like we have Quebec has some of the cleanest power in the world. It varies from province to province. We also have some more dirtier power in Alberta too. But that was the cleanly like. It's something like 300 times cleaner than the power in Alberta, because it's mainly hydroelectric, but that was through like the flooding of Innu land. And it also has led to like the James Bay Cree and the Cree Nation like redefining nation to nation relationships, in Canada, through like preventing that from happening through like decades and billions of dollars of law, like through the legal system, of protecting their interests because of the way that the Inuit were taking advantage of that, but also admitting that like having this clean power is an important thing as well. There's an excellent series actually by New Hampshire Public Radio from some number of years ago, and they have a show called Inside Out, and they have like I think it's like a 3-part thing called Power Line. Which is not to be confused with another podcast called Power Lines, which is about people who work on power lines, that talks about like because New Hampshire and parts of New England were looking at buying power from Quebec, and so they like traced it back. But I think that like those are big things in there that shows how these things like show up in day to day. But in terms of like things that people can do right now, I've referred to myself as an eco-stenographer, and so that's like a framework that's rethinking the production process so that as opposed to like pre-production, presentation, and disposal, moves to like collaboration, celebration, and circulation. And so it's sort of like valuing everything, uh, human, non-human, insofar as the collaboration of how things come together, and then looking at the opening as a celebration point, more of a midway point, because everything retains value and it goes into circularity. And sometimes that's hard to do, but one of the ways that we've been doing it on campus, and I see more and more happening, is just like in the budgeting process, having an end of life discussion of materials or that, so you can like decide about them before you're like trying to figure out how to mitigate things, saying like, where is this going to go at the end? Are we cool with that? And one of the other interesting places, because it feels like the last sort of like boogeyman of a lot of this work, is around IP. I'm on the board of the Associated Designers of Canada, a member of our like equivalent to USA 829, which is ADC 659. And we've had a lot of success with protecting the artists and the contracts that we've come up with, but they protect either the full work or they don't protect like the composite parts of it. And there's this huge gray space. So we've been doing a lot of work of like working with designers to work with the engaging theaters to articulate where their IP starts and ends, so that it doesn't stand in the way of reuse, right? Because that's one of the things like, oh, we can't reuse anything because it's all protected or it's not protected enough. And there's just like no one has the money to sue anybody to actually figure it out. So we're just like trying to proactively like add that at the contracting phase, being like, okay, this is where it stops so you can reuse this element to it or things like that. So like finding those clever ways to like work through the problems or the barriers for it have been really interesting and really collaborative. Like people that you think like don't want to work together, or would feel like someone would take advantage of it. Like it's one of the easiest things to do between like Pact, which is our equivalent to Lort, and the designers union has been like, okay, let's figure out this in between for it together.